Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to a great discussion. We realize that we're between you and lunch, and that's why this discussion is going to be extra stimulating and engaging, so everyone gets ready for a delicious lunch. So, in terms of an introduction for what we're about to discuss today, we know that the economic strengths that shaped Canada's strategy in the past were largely based and rooted on a resource-based, tangible economy. And we also know that we are now in a new and very different era, and that the business sectors that generate wealth through digital assets, through data, through intellectual property, and other intangible resources are growing at an accelerated rate, and in many cases faster than the traditional resource-based sector. Everyone in this room is probably familiar with the often quoted statistic that the value of intangible assets has risen from 17% of the value of the S&P 500 in 1975 to around 90% in 2022. And some of you may not know this because the internet was down and is probably still down in the room today, but Shopify had their quarterly earnings call this morning and released their results. And some of you may know that their stock price shot up by 20%. And the reason is in part because of the impressive earnings, but the president of Shopify, Harley Finkelstein, said the following, and I wrote it down and scribbled it here. He said, "We believe AI is for everyone, and its capabilities should be captured and embedded across the entirety of a business." And he wasn't talking about Shopify. He was talking about the hundreds of thousands of merchants that Shopify serves. So in this context, what we're going to be discussing with our panelists today is the strategy that Canada needs for a digital economy in order to address the challenges and the opportunities and to remain competitive in such an environment. So to begin, I'm going to address the first question to Senator Deakin. What are the challenges in the Canadian tech and AI landscape, and what strategies could enhance Canada's position and competitiveness? Senator?
Thanks so much. It's really a treat to be here in a room full of experts. I'm not an expert. I'm a champion of the work that you do and the fact that we need to create a really big opportunity for Canada in the intangibles world that's being unlocked. We, in the Banking Committee, we studied this issue last spring and issued a report in June called Needed an Innovation Strategy for the Data-Driven Economy. The subtitle of this was that Canada is a global hub for innovation in tech and AI. I think Canada is a collection of points of excellence, but we are not. A hub to me is an ecosystem that's integrated and working together and coordinated with government policy, and that we're choosing to take a leadership position in the world. We've got some great points of excellence, but we're not yet as a country very good at, we're good at converting money into research, but we're not good at converting research into money. And if we don't start to worry about that, we're not going to have the money to pay for the research, and our grandkids are not going to be very well off. So the world's changing so quickly that we've got to get a government strategy, the whole of government strategy that is up to the potential of this transformation that's occurring in the world. And that's, our view in this is that we need to prioritize a different approach. Obviously, we desperately need improved privacy legislation to protect Canadians. We're at the wrong end of a data vacuum, and as it was said at the event I was at last night, these algorithms are coming for our data. We've got some of the richest data in the world because we have one of the most integrated and diverse societies in the world. That gives us a great global advantage that we're not taking advantage of. We need to change how we look at IP, particularly as it relates to the digital economy, into competition law. How does competition law have to change to make sure there's not abusive dominance that we see so much now? And how do we become agile enough to regulate when Ottawa and other parts of our country regulate in decades? but these technologies are moving in months. And I think a lot of that has to involve standards, codes of practice, and certification. Regulators will not be able to do the job fast enough, and legislators, the part that I'm involved in, will not be able to do the job fast enough because legislation gets bogged down too often in partisan debate. And it's not about the issue itself, it's about where can we find division. So those would be my main comments. We've got to move really fast. Biden, as was pointed out, is already moving really, really quickly, and Canada is very much a follower, despite having tremendous points of excellence.
Thank you for that, Senator. Mai, you're an innovator and an entrepreneur. Can you provide the perspective from a private sector lens in terms of where do you see the challenges and opportunities in a data-driven economy for Canada?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my context is really from the private sector, as was mentioned. I think I do agree with a lot of the things that Senator Deakin said, but just to kind of put some, finer points on it, when we think about AI in particular, I think it's very important that we recognize the fact that AI was a gift from Canada to the world. So let's just let that sink in for a second. The three godfathers, or the godfathers of AI as they're called, and I highly respect every single one of them, they are as a result of Canadian taxpayer money into research. So, Senator Deakin's point around, research turning into money being the issue, 100% that is one of the biggest challenges that we have. So again, AI has been a gift to the world, but we're not reaping the benefits of that. Another point that I really want to stress is if you look at the market cap of companies, global companies that have been enabled by AI, their market cap is more than the GDP of Canada, okay? You can go Google this and look it up yourself. That, again, is a fundamental issue that I think we face. So what are the challenges as an innovator, as a private sector sort of participant in this? Some of the biggest challenges that I've faced personally and also learned about from talking to other industry sort of startup and scale-ups is one of the big ones is I think we have cultural systemic issues, and I'm not going to go into all the details of where I think those things go wrong, but one really tangible one to talk about is procurement. We have a huge challenge with purchasing Canadian technology. Why? Why do we have an issue with purchasing Canadian technology? We shouldn't. It shouldn't take that long to purchase Canadian technology. We should be, maybe not giving preferential treatment, but we need to figure out ways to sort of level that playing field, because as a small business, as a scale-up, I cannot fund years and years of trying to sell to not just government, but also to large financial institutions. So procurement is definitely one of them. And a joke that, I think I've told many people, and this was told to me when I was out there trying to raise money for my business. I was told, you know what, you need to sell outside of Canada. So the joke really is that as a private sector, you have to export and then import back into Canada. So I know all of this sounds negative, and I truly don't mean any disrespect to the leaders, because I think we're all trying to do the right thing. But where do we kind of go forward? How do we go forward? I think we need to look at sort of foundational infrastructure, foundational technology, foundational systems that are going to help us in this new economy. Looking at data infrastructure, digital infrastructure. We need some of that that's homegrown. We need the ability to share data more easily. And again, to Senator Deakin's point, data is really the value of AI. That's what's powering AI. So our Canadian data is something that we have to be very careful about not allowing that to leak out. And the other piece is that data has value. It has monetary value. So when we shift our thinking around the fact that data is an asset, we really are going to better manage that data. We're going to govern that data better within our organizations. So don't think of data as sort of this afterthought and it's only the AI application. No, we really need to put in proper guardrails around how that data is being harnessed. So I'll stop there. That might be too much, but
No, that's great, and I think that's an excellent segue to Keith. Keith, and Senator Deakin identified some of the critical challenges. Can you perhaps maybe now speak a little bit to what are some of the key elements of a successful innovation strategy that could address some of these challenges, and what are the tools and the toolbox to ensuring that data governance and security are paid attention to, while at the same time promoting innovation and competitiveness?
Thank you. Let's talk about those tools in that toolbox. Let's talk about the toolbox. We heard, right, with respect to the U.S. and the number of pages that make up a very comprehensive strategy with a number of different tools that are being levered on in order to have success within the American market. The same is true of the European Union. Look at the legislation that they've proposed. It's not just legislation. It's a variety of other tools that are codified in that legislation to enable for a competitive market and ultimately one that benefits Europeans. In Canada, we've heard, loud and clear in terms of where we currently sit with respect to legislation here, but we've also noted its shortcomings. And I would say that right now, the way that I kind of look at the tools in that toolbox is we're by no means leveraging many of those tools that exist. And instead what we're doing is using a hammer to hammer in a screw. See, I can't even say it right because it's nonsense, right? So this is where, when you look at our legislative frameworks and the way in which we codify the direction we want to go as a country to improve the wellness, the competitiveness of our nation, we need to, in fact, codify the very tools that we need to use. Now, in order to do that, and Maya referred to procurement, that is one of the tools. Unfortunately, we have a number of different players that are that can play a leadership role that just don't understand what that tool is in that toolbox. And so they'll go to what they know. And unfortunately, to effectively regulate AI, it is not just simply about legislation and regulation. We need to pull on levers like procurement. We need to talk an IP strategy. We need to talk about standards and certification, like Colin highlighted in his remarks. These are tools that effectively can enable society as a collective. So not just as policymakers, not just as industry, not just as civil society or the public, where we can actually all get together, convene in structured consensus building processes to build out the framework and the guardrails that we effectively need to maintain our well-being and to compete. This is what is effectively in Biden's executive order. And he's tasked a number of different departments. He's leveraged relationships with industry to leverage their tools that they have in their toolbox to create a very competitive society, and Europe's no different. So in Canada, I would say in large respects, we have capacity to build the infrastructure, to build that capacity. But in order to do it, you need the expertise in the room. And unfortunately, with the way in which we pursue our legislative agenda, and Colin, you mentioned the political games, if you will, that kind of get into the way of that, we need effective forms and institutions to be built to go beyond a 4-year term of government. We need the expertise in the room to codify those rules and those regulations in such a way, and regulations, I'm using the small r here, not the capital R, for AI. So I would say, let's learn what a Robertson screwdriver does. Let's learn what a hammer does. Let's learn what's actually in that toolbox. Because we need to pull on all of those collective levers to govern this responsibly and to effectively have any sort of semblance on competing with Europe and the US and China for that matter.
So, Senator, what can be done at the governmental level to help facilitate the development and then the implementation of some of these tools that that Keith has mentioned? Is there something that we can do now?
First thing is to recognize the size of the problem. We have lots of silos, and AI is the responsibility of one department called, well, it's Industry Canada, but it's now called Innovation, Science, and whatever. This is a whole of government issue. Earlier this week, I think on Monday, Bob Fay from CG did an op-ed in the Globe talking about data's value, and its worth is, equal to our oil and gas reserves in terms of its total value in some measures. But we don't treat it that way. Invest Canada doesn't protect the export of Canadians' data if a company's taken over. Competition Bureau has no right to be involved in abusive dominance or anything in that regard, or mergers that involve the transfer of people's data from one organization to another. We do not have a whole of government approach. And we will not become the global leader that we could become. And I genuinely have always believed that Canada can become the most trusted source of the most trusted applications in the world. We have that ability. We have that position in the world, but it will go and it'll be lost if we're not careful. And every day we don't have updated privacy legislation in this country, more of our data from individuals is gone for good, and we have no idea how it's being used, but we can be sure it's not being used for our benefit. It's being used for the benefit of others outside of Canada or within Canada. So this is a whole of government problem, and we've got to look at it as an existential crisis, similarly to climate change in my mind. We have got an opportunity to manage the risks and create the opportunities for the world to take advantage of and for Canadians to take advantage of. But if we don't take a whole of government approach, we'll have trouble. If you ever go to my website, you'll see that I've got a slogan up front, which is an innovative economy needs an innovative government. And Canadian governments, as a rule, don't tend to be very innovative. We tend to be incremental. And this is not a time for incremental efforts. We've got to make some fundamental changes. And again, that's why I encourage you. I'd love your feedback, to be very honest, on our bank study. Needed an innovation strategy for the data-driven economy, because we need to get this right. Parliamentarians need to be informed. Together with Michelle Rempel-Garner, we've formed and now have an all-party caucus on emerging technologies. It was great last night. We had the Digital Governance Council present, and it just was eye-opening for every parliamentarian there. We've got to do that work. We've got to talk to your MPs. Go spend some time with your MPs and give them the facts. If we don't recognize we have a problem, we'll never find the solutions.
Thank you. We have a question that's come in from the audience that I think speaks to some of the challenges and the opportunities that have been raised. The question is, in an environment where legislation and design processes are traditionally slow, how can organizations respond quickly to emerging trends and technologies in the data-driven economy? Keith, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start just by saying, unfortunately, without us taking that, leading stance to this and actually codifying, there's going to be a heavy reliance on what others in the world are doing. We heard it all through today. Oh, alignment is good. Oh, we're harmonizing. Well, that's because, quite frankly, we weren't front-footed on this issue. And so we're having to strategize to be reactive versus proactive. So what I'd say for the smaller, medium enterprises that want to operate in this space, they're going to need to look to other markets. We already have to do that anyway. We got that problem that Maya described in terms of having to export before we can actually have our products sold here in Canada. So in a lot of respects, I kind of look at that question as much as we look to other markets and recognize that our regulatory legislative process is slow, we kind of do it onto ourselves because we're not actually codifying or saying what we want. Our legislation should speak to the what. When you consider, for example, the Consumer Product Safety Act, what do we want? Safe products. What did they do?
They're safe.
General prohibition in the act saying all products shall be safe. We codified what we wanted, and then through a series of legislation, standards, regulations, procurements, and otherwise, we now can effectively govern the ecosystem of consumer products. The same needs to be true for things like AI and any other sort of digital technology. We need to say what we want. And what we want is safe. We want reliability. We want those things. And I don't understand, to the life of me, why we continue to talk about Canadian values, but when we hear those words, those are the only words we hear. We don't know what those values are, and we haven't actually enshrined them anywhere other than in our Constitution, of which we can certainly look at opportunities to codify that into legislation for the way in which we govern things like technology, protecting our democratic institutions, protecting things like free speech and those types of things, right? So there's certainly opportunity for us to take lessons from a constitution, and also then looking at the way in which we go about codifying within an act what we want. And when I say we codify what we want, we get to the values, but then we also get to the mechanics and the way in which it operates. And so instead of, because quite frankly, we're going to say any rule you put into legislation or regulation is going to be outdated by the time it gets enforced in the technology world. Technology just moves too fast. But if we codify the way in which we continually evolve the rules through things like standards and certification, we now have a vehicle that can be codified in legislation that describes that process. So, for example, in the EU, it's going to require AI solutions to be tested and certified against recognized standards. The US, near and dear to Colin's heart here around open banking, the US around open banking put that we're going to, as the consumer safety protection group there, they're going to recognize open, transparent, consensus-based standards. And so it gives a mechanism for which we can actually govern these technologies in a way that's agile, because standard setting is faster than legislation and regulation.
In terms of codifying what we want, the we, and this is a question for Mai, is there an opportunity, or to put it more strongly, a requirement that we does include the industry perspective? What is the role of industry in terms of collaborating with government on the development of some of this codification and some of these guardrails that we're talking about that Keith has mentioned?
I mean, I think it's an easy answer. 100% industry needs to be involved every step of the way. And, one other thing that I did want to raise is, we're talking about strategy here today, and strategy is obviously very important, but there's an execution element as well to this that we're getting wrong. In my opening comments, I did say, I believe we've over-indexed on research and under-indexed on commercialization. And I know it feels like it's a broken record, but especially now, it's really critical that we kind of think that through. And if our objective here is, okay, we want to be that trusted digital nation, then we need trusted infrastructure. We need those guardrails around our data. We need infrastructure to be able to do the computations, to do the algorithm running. We need to be able to share this data amongst government with private sector. So all of the details of the execution level, are going to be critical. So it's not, again, just talking about, okay, this is our vision and these are our values. That's great. But we need guidance around, well, how do we actually execute on some of those big picture thinking? And that's where industry can really play a role, because we are the ones that are tasked with, okay, well, how do we make this practical, right? I'm not going to make money off of a document that says, these are my principles. I'm going to make money off of software and infrastructure, technology that's going to add value to the economy. So industry absolutely needs to be at the table every step of the way. And then the other thing that I would say is, we are an economy that's made up of obviously a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. We should be happy. We've got a lot of startups, but we're missing the point. We need more larger businesses. We need more scale-ups, and we need technology companies that are building, again, that foundational digital and data infrastructure. And this is not to say that the government is not helping here. There's a lot of private sector participants, the VC community. We need to invest in some of these horizontal technologies and infrastructure technologies, and not only focus on sort of these specific targeted application vertical level solutions. So yeah. I'll leave it there.
So we are now with 1 minute left. Any kind of rapid fire, 30 seconds, any final thoughts in terms of key takeaways? What do we need to get right? And I'll add, what do we need to get right, or what do we need to do in the next 12 months, given the rapid acceleration of these technologies? ChatGPT was introduced in September of 2022. That's just barely 1 year ago, and look how rapidly our world has changed. So, Senator, starting with you.
We need to make sure that Canadians get increased privacy protection. That's job number one. I can't wait to get that bill in the Senate in whatever form it comes, because right now we're at the wrong end of a data vacuum. Secondly, a whole of government approach needs to be encouraged that involves Canadian innovators as being part of our solution. We're not doing this for them. Canadian innovators need to be part of Canada's solution so that we have more Canadian-owned, Canadian exported, not by selling the companies, by selling the services, technologies and businesses that are creating wealth in Canada and delivering trust to the world. And so those would be my two big ones.
Keith?
Build the governance mechanics in the rules that we set, versus defining directly the way in which to govern. I would say that, for me, it's to get the institutional capacity built in our country such that we're able to codify the governance mechanics around effective governance. And to do that, it's beyond an all-of-government approach. It's an all-of-Canada approach.
And my last word.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think it's eating our own dog food. We talk a lot and we have great ideas, but every day that you're making a decision on this, think twice. How is this helping Canada? Not just your organization. And I think, that can go a long way. And please include private sector in these conversations. Thank you.
Well, please join me in thanking the panel for a very passionate and engaging discussion.